Good afternoon, good evening to everyone, no matter where you're joining us today. Welcome to today's webinar with our first look into the new features and enhancements of Itential's latest release, the Itential Automation Platform 21.1. Quick introduction, my name is Alex Digitz. I'm a Senior Product Manager here at Itential, and in today's webinar, we're going to focus on showcasing how Itential's latest release extends automation across any API and any network device. There's a couple of other key things that I'm going to highlight. We're going to go through some demos, and hopefully at the end, we'll have a lot of time for a Q&A session as well. Before we get started with that, a couple of housekeeping points. Everyone on the call will be muted the entire time, but there is the opportunity for you to submit questions. It's at the bottom of the screen, so whenever you have a question, just type it in. I won't go through the question list during my demos, but we'll, at the end of the presentation, we should have at least 5 to 10 minutes to go through as many of the questions as we can. Any questions that we don't get to answer during this webinar, we'll definitely get back to you specifically via email, and we'll answer them shortly after the webinar. With that, let's dive right in and get started. Since we have a couple of new people here that might even be new to Itential, I'm going to go over 2 quick slides to just showcase what it is that we're doing, where we are placed in the market, and what the automation platform can do for you. So basically, Itential is intelligent automation at the verge of network and cloud, where those two combine, which is something that we've seen more and more in today's use cases. And we offer a low-code solution for those end-to-end network configurations, and combine a low-code canvas where you can string API calls together for your automations with specific network operations like configuration management, compliance, remediation, and stuff like that. What does it look like in the architecture? So if you see the blue box where we have our Itential Automation Platform, you see the 2 key things here, where we have the Itential Configuration Manager for all of our config and compliance management. That is a custom-built UI specifically to help you with the daily management of your devices, be it backups, be it device groups, be it golden configuration, preventing configuration drift, all of that, and some reporting functions as well. And in our Itential Automation Studio on the right-hand side, that's our low-code canvas where we string together different API calls, different Ansible playbook, your own scripts that you can bring into the Itential Automation Platform to string those together for a good end-to-end automation. Below that, there's a couple of things, a couple of key things I want to highlight. Is we have our orange integration layer there, our data federation layer, and the data transformation layer. And I'm actually going to roll that from the bottom up, because that's the steps we need to take to actually get them into our Automation Studio canvas. So at the bottom, our integration layer, you've heard me say that many times, we speak open APIs, Swagger, Postman collections, whatever you have, you can easily create that or directly import that into our Itential Automation Platform, be it through adapters or through integrations. And basically, I'll have another slide on that, but basically what we're saying here is if your system has APIs, we can integrate with it and we can make it better. On the data federation side, that's a really, really important aspect for us to make sure we always show you correct live data federated between multiple systems. So your device inventory, your network is located in very disparate places, right? You have some devices that you might manage with an orchestrator. You have some devices that you only manage through CLI access. You might have some Ansible managed devices. And what we do in our data federation layer is we look at all these endpoints that you have integrated with, and we're pulling live data every time you make a call on a device, every time you view the details of a device. You always see federated live data that has access control, RBAC enabled on it, and that always lets you see what the network is actually like. So we can remain stateless. We can remain on a federation basis. So there's never going to be an issue with a disparate source of truth that you need to reconcile in some way, because instead of saving the state of your actual devices, we always query the live data. And then in green, the last step towards our automation studio is the data transformation layer. You might have heard me talk about before about our JST Designer, and I'm going to show a quick demo of the JST Designer and the new features in it in this webinar as well. But basically, if you've ever thought about or worked in a scenario where you try to build an end-to-end automation, you definitely ran into the case where API call A, it provides some output, and you need to map that and put that into another API call B, but they just don't fit together, right? You have an output schema and the input schema, but they don't really work together. And with our JST Designer solution, that's the only solution that I know that where you can have a complete low-code UI environment to produce in an easy way reusable or on-the-fly data transformations for your API calls that can handle the most complex data sets without having to write any custom code or do anything specific. So that's our Itential automation platform. As I said, we have a lot of self-serve capabilities from the top, so we can trigger automations by event or by API call, by schedule, and tons of integrations to network-specific system or to IT systems in general. And if you look at the history and if you look at how we worked with integrations and how we integrated systems into our platform, there has definitely been a lot of evolvement and a lot of change over time, right? We basically started with a couple of distinct IT systems that we integrated with and a couple of distinct devices that we supported. And then when we think a couple of years back, like in 2018, we came out with our first adapter wizard at the time, and that blew up the number of systems that we integrate with, because again, as I said earlier, it only takes a couple of minutes of clicking through a UI wizard to build an integration or an adapter to any system. So then at that point, we basically, customers and prospects, they stopped asking, hey, do you integrate with the system? The assumed answer was yes, so that we could basically proclaim, if your system has an API, we integrate with it. In the next step, and that happened in 2020, we actually pulled many of those IT systems into our configuration management solution, because we realized, I mean, you don't only need golden configuration, compliance, remediation on your CLI-based network devices, be it physical or virtual. You also need the same level of golden configuration capabilities for your new cloud services that you're managing in your network. So your VPCs, your Meraki VLANs, your SD-WAN solution, you also need to provide support for creating a golden configuration, for doing compliance management with those as well. So we natively bake those into Configuration Manager. And the next step, next logical step that we took in this latest release of 21.1 is now we also offer an extensible device support, more or less like a UI wizard now for specific device types. So that, again, we never have to ask the question, do you support this device type? Do you support this device OS or whatever? Because we do, and if we don't, there's a very quick way for you as a customer to just onboard that device and extend Itential's device support to your specific device type. And I'll go over that in a quick demo as well. If you look at key features that I want to highlight, that I want you to take away from for 21.1, it's we can now put transformations, our data transformation layer, directly on transitions in our workflow canvas. Super cool feature, very excited about it. I'm going to show it in a second. We now expose all API routes of any integration or adapter that you have in your system. So you can basically use our platform now as an API gateway with full access control, with full route management, and with the full capabilities to actually query those systems in our JSON forms. I'll go over that as well. I already mentioned the extensible device support, which is definitely a big effort and a big new feature that we've added in 21.1. And then we've also made some changes in terms of network validation. And what we mean by that is instead of retroactively saying, oh, a change that I made to the config of the device pushed that device out of compliance, we've now also enabled tasks that do network validation before you actually push config to a device. So we have a new task for you that you can use in any automation that just checks the device config that you want to push to that device, and checks if pushing that config onto the device would be a problem with any compliance rules that are already set for that device or for that device group. So let's actually dive into the specific features here. So we have, as I said, we have the transformations on transitions, and what that is, basically, you see here on the right-hand side, we have a workflow with a couple of transitions between those tasks. And as I said earlier, right, sometimes the input of one API doesn't match the output of the other API. So we need some data transformations in between. And going forward, instead of having a specific transformation task here, which like kind of clogs up the canvas and has more tasks than you actually would need for a workflow, we now can put them on transitions so that your workflow stays clean. It's easier to manage, and you really see the high-level business processes and not the specific data manipulation tasks that you don't really care about on that level. Going forward, we also have automations, automation assets as tasks. So that's a feature that has been requested for a while. And what that means is everything that you build in Automation Studio, be it forms, templates, the transformations specifically themselves, they are now available on the right-hand search in your usual task list. I'm going to go over that in a demo in a second. But basically what that means is you are now fully able to use anything that you've built. You can just search for it, add it to the canvas, and immediately you have that available without having to type the name specifically there. And to make building transformations even easier, we've added a live preview to transformations. Again, I'm going to show that in a second. And what that does is basically it allows you, when the live preview mode is enabled, it allows you for any change that you make to your JST. It tells you, A, is that JST currently valid? And B, what is the current result? If it's valid, what is the current result? So you get immediate feedback when you add new tasks, when you paint new transitions. You get immediate feedback if you're doing the right thing, if it actually does what you want it to do. And with that, that's the Automation Studio session. So now I'm going to share my screen. We're actually going to do a dive into the new Automation Studio, and I'm going to show you how to do a couple of these things. So let me share my screen, and you now should see the Itential Automation Platform screen. So this is the new homepage of the Itential Automation Platform. You see a couple of design changes that we've done in the past. You find your Automation Studio here on the left-hand side. And again, we have all workflows, forms, JSON forms available here. And those are basically all components that you can string together for your end-to-end automation. In this case, we're going to look at the workflows, and just a quick thing that I don't even have a slide for, but a lot of you have requested that, so I'm definitely going to take some time to showcase it. We now have grouping functionalities for these workflows. So, I mean, you might have seen that for your scenario as well. When you scroll through workflow list, you might have a lot of workflows that have the same prefix because they're all flows or child flows for the same use case, like here in my case, the DNS management. What I can do now in IAP 21.1 is I can create a workflow group. I'm going to name that DNS management. And I have a filter to add workflows to that. So I can just say DNS, looks like these are all the ones. I'm going to create that. And now you see they're no longer just within my flat hierarchy of workflows, but they're actually in this DNS management group, and I can find them I can find them all in this DNS management folder. I can collapse it and expand it as I want. So it gives me the option to quickly organize my workflows and group them together. The important thing to note here is we're not copying workflows around. This is strictly a UI feature, and that's actually very important because it might very well be that one of these DNS management workflows, like the NS records here, for example, that one might be used by different use cases. We might have another DNS management use case that uses this same subflow as well. So this is just a reference. So even if I delete this folder again, for example, all workflows will still remain there, and they will just be ungrouped again, not within this workflow group. And with that, it also is clear that workflows can be in multiple workflow groups, again, because we're just storing a reference there. But enough about the grouping. Let's actually go ahead and build some stuff. And actually don't have a specific use case in mind, but let's say there might be a firewall policy that we want to push to a couple of devices. So let's create a new workflow from that from scratch. We have our Gen 2 canvas available and ready for us here. And what we can do here, or what I want to show, is the whole transformations on transitions feature. And what I can do for this is when I click on this new node, you actually now see a new view here. You see like all your last recently used tasks, which is super useful. I use that feature all the time. And you actually see, like in me preparing the demo, I've actually already have a lot of recently used tasks that I will use again today. But for the sake of this demo, I'm just going to search for them again. And so, for example, usually what we do when we push firewall policies onto a device, we want to do some kind of pre-check before to see that the device is actually in a state where we that can allow any kind of changes. And so since we can just use an iOS pre-check for now, but what you see here, the important thing is you not only see tasks here on the right-hand side, but you see actually all workflows that match that condition, and all command templates that match that condition. And if I leave the query a little wider, you see here, we, for example, have 233 more or total tasks that match like the pre-filter. And we have some more command templates that that match that pre-search string. And so now what I can do is I can just click on this port tuner pre-check here, for example, which I can use for my firewall policies as well as a pre-check, because it just checks the health of the device. And you see now automatically the run command template as a generic task was added here. And I've actually added, when I look into the variable section, I actually added this specific pre-check template. So I no longer need to add the run command template task and then type in the name of my command template. I can just search that and immediately add it from the search bar here. So with that, what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm just going to leave the template itself, and I'm just going to create a few job variables that we actually have something to put into this job. And what we can see now is our input schema here. If I click on the input schema for this workflow, we see now that we have like this type field now and this devices field, the variables field and the devices field that we're now requiring. And if you think about how that was previously done, like in the Gen 1 canvas, for example, you would have to create like a couple of query tasks to actually query the devices, to query the variables, and then pipe them in to this run command template to actually use those variables. What I can do now is literally just click on the transition and say add JST here. And what it does is it takes all job variables and every output from a previous task and lists them on the left-hand side here, and everything that my next task needs as inputs on the right-hand side. And all I can do then is, I'm going to pipe in variables when I start this workflow. So I'm going to make sure these are going to my run command template variables, and I'm going to pass a device group, a list of devices in, and those are the devices that I'm going to run the pre-check on, and that's literally it. Now this task is fully configured. We know what command template to run, which pre-check to run. We know what variables to use and which devices to run it on, all without having added anything in the task details itself. I did not even need to click on it. And it's a really, really powerful thing that we've added here. And we see like the simple changes when the JST is actually added to a transition. And we get some more options like insert a node before the JST, insert a node after the JST to make sure we don't lose the reference and that we can still edit it here. And most of those JSTs, as you can imagine, they are specific to the workflow context. So we don't even store them as actual transitions. They're just referenced by the workflow itself. They're exported with the workflow. So you don't need to worry about specific references for those JSTs as well. If you want to reuse the JST, we can do that as well. We have the Save As feature available for you here. If you click that, and provide a name here, then we're actually going to store that JST in the transformations database. So super useful feature. And just like to show the power of it, I'm going to add one more task here, insert node. And since I'm not exactly sure which Ansible module I'm going to use to make those firewall changes, I can actually say, don't know what to search for, explore all options. So we now have a full UI view of all tasks that I have available. In my demo system, it's like 8,500 different API calls and scripts and stuff that I have available in my system here. Additionally, all workflows, forms, templates that I have on my system, all of them are available for me on this full text view. And one of my personal favorite features is I now have this info button, which actually shows me all the properties, the description, everything that this thing actually will do. And so now I can start and look for firewall, for example, and you see, of course, we have a big IP and 40 US modules loaded, so there's tons of firewall things we can do. For now, let's say here we have a big IP firewall policy. Sure, we can add that. So I can show the info here, and if I like it, I can assign this to the node, or I can actually load the additional documentation of this specific Ansible module directly from my Automation Studio here as well. In this case, I'm just going to assign it to the node. And again, you see, to execute this Ansible module, we need a host array, groups, we need a name, string, and so on. The name is required here. So again, what we can do is just add a JST before, and then, for example, say, I don't know, the variables. I'm not sure how useful they will be, but we can set static stuff. Like if we want a static description, we can do that. And then for the host that we want to execute it on, we just say the devices or the hosts that we want to execute it on. We're going to save that. And so again, the devices will be piped in, the device group will be piped in for the hosts without us having to change anything. And we actually see that here. If we look at that, we actually see that the reference tasks has this new hosts from one command template pre-check, which is exactly what the JST that we just added does. It takes the hosts from a previous task. So that's the add JST feature. That's the new search feature. We've seen the grouping mechanism here. So a lot has changed, a lot of cool new things in Automation Studio. That's not all. There's a lot more to discover. We've actually launched a training session of 21.1 today. So if you go to Itential Academy, these training courses are live now. You can click around and learn more about specific features here in Automation Studio, as well as in other parts of the application. So yeah, all of that's available to you. But for now, I'm going to jump back to my slide deck, and I'm actually going to, because there's a couple of more cool features that I would like to show. And with that, we can move on to the automation platform, because there's two things that I want to highlight that will prove really useful, I hope, to you as well. One is the sensitive data mode. What we can do now in IAP 21.1 is we can obfuscate any data from Job Manager or from JSON forms. What we're using in the background there is a UI schema of that we call password. But it can not only be used for passwords, it can be used for anything that you would not want other people to see. That could be, some of our customers have workflows that use credit card information or personally identifiable information for specific users. All of that can be hidden. All of those features that we are providing follow in line with security policies around personally identifiable information. But basically, for you, that means you have full control over the Job Manager UI now, which fields, which incoming and outgoing variables should be available to everyone, and which should only be be able to be viewed by, for example, admin users. And the other new thing that I want to highlight on the platform side itself is being able to use IAP as an API gateway. And what that means is we now create API routes for all adapters and integrations that have the routes field enabled, which is most of them, at least all the ones that we have in our open source directory. It's all of our integrations. If you don't know the difference, integrations and adapters, we have a good webinar and training session around that, around our 2020.2 release of last December. And those routes that we now expose, of course, you can call them from any external system, but you can also use them in our JSON Forms application to make live calls to external system to populate drop-down lists, for example. And I'm going to go through that in a quick demo as well. So let's jump back to the Itential Automation platform. And what I've prepared here is just a little form that allows me to create a Jira ticket or a project in Jira. But what it uses is our Jira integration that we have in our platform. So if you look at the fields like project type, which is a dropdown, if you look at the settings of this field, and here go through the options. Currently, we have the static options, software and business, as two project types from our Jira software. And what that looks like if I open the form for a user to create a new ticket in Jira, for example, what they see is exactly that, software and business. I mean, this works, of course, but the problem is if my Jira administrator creates a new project type, I need to go ahead and change my form here as well to now reflect this new project type, which of course leads to inconsistencies, to additional work, to new deployments. We really don't want that. We, again, in the sense of federating data and always looking for the source of truth, we actually want Jira, we want to ask Jira how to populate that drop-down field. And with the API routes that we have available now, we can actually do this. We can say, I want this content to be loaded dynamically, and I actually want to go to my Jira integration. And this, I think, is our live Itential Jira integration. So this is actually set up to load what we have. And so we can get any REST call, any API call that our Jira integration offers. In this case, we have one that offers us the project type, and we can actually try to actually make that call and see this is the API response that we're getting. We're getting a response of three items with 5 keys each. And what I'm really looking for is probably the formatted key here. That's what I would want to see for users to see in my drop-down list. So what I can do here is I can map that data and say I want to look at the response. And my drop-down list should show the formatted key, and I can actually test that as well and see this is going to be my options now going forward in my form. So I'm going to save that and show the form. Look at the form again, and when I fill that out now, I actually see as a user, I see software, service desk, and business that I can select. And if I were to add another project type in Jira, as soon as I do that and people fill out this form, they would see details, they would see the additional project type added, or if one of those change, of course, they would get the live data there as well. So as you can see, that opens tons of possibilities to integrate with any system, be it your inventory system, your ticket system, whatever has APIs, we can now leverage those to get live data for people to for drop-down lists when they fill out forms to then start off workflows and kick off end-to-end automations. And to dive a little bit deeper into that, I just want to show that real quick. If we go to our Admin Essentials application, where that's the application where all admin stuff is handled, like which applications are running, which adapters are running, what is their configuration and stuff like that. If we actually look at Admin Essentials and we look at the user management, what you will see there, I'm just going to click on my user here. We not only have application roles anymore, and groups, we now also have adapter roles and integration roles as well. And those are the two things that have been added on the access control side here by enabling this feature. By default, and that's important, right? We're fully backwards compatible. That means by default, when you upgrade to 21.1, none of these will be enabled. And what that means is no one who didn't have access to API routes because they weren't available in previous versions, they will still don't have that access. So you're not exposing anything, but in 21.1, you can now go ahead and add specific things, add specific roles to users who do need to make these API calls. And what you see here in the role section, same thing. Now you see all of your adapters and integrations like Jira here, for example. And you can actually create custom roles, and down to the API level, you could create a custom role saying like my Jira user, and you can select specifically which API route they will be able to access and which they won't. So you have full fine-grained access control on everything that's going on in your system with those new API routes. Okay, let me switch back to my slides. The last large section that I want to talk about today is our configuration management solution. And as I mentioned earlier, there's two very key features that we've added there. One is the validation for config changes. So we now have a task that fully allows you to say, I'm going to pass in the config that I want to push to a device, the device's name, and in the background, we figure out what kind of compliance rules are currently set for this device, be it through configuration trees, be it through different device groups, and will the configuration that you're about to push on that device be in violation of any of the compliance rules that you set. And you're fully in control of what the behavior should be. I mean, maybe you want to show a warning, maybe you want someone else to approve that change, like a network manager or something. Or maybe you want to flat out decline that config push and say, fix this remediation error first, or fix this config error first before trying again pushing that config to a device. And the second part, and that's really a big one, is the extensible device support. And I've mentioned it earlier for our configuration manager application, but it actually, we've done changes to make this work with our command templates application as well. So if you have any commands that you want to run on devices that we don't know yet or that we don't support yet, or if you want to do any compliance and remediation activities in Configuration Manager of previously unsupported or unknown device types, you can now build those in a very quick fashion. We have a couple of templates and the UI wizard to basically walk you through the creation process there. And that should hopefully eliminate the entire need for, I mean, you know that from us previously. I'm sure you know that from other systems and other vendors that you might have worked with. You have a new device type that you want supported, and then you need to wait maybe a couple of days, weeks, maybe even months. Then you need to deploy a new version of the software. None of this will be necessary anymore because this extensible device support is fully built in JSON files, so we can ship those as pre-builds, as part of our pre-builds collection. You can create them yourselves. They're automatically HA aware because there's no code that needs to be deployed on a specific server. So you can add device support for a new device type without even restarting your IAP server. It'll just work out of the box. And with that, I'm going to go into my last demo, and I'm going to show you how this could work. So we're back here in the Itential Automation platform, and I'm actually going to start with the easier part. I'm going to start with the command templates. And for everyone who has not known that before, or who's new to Itential, within Automation Studio, I'm just going to navigate there real quick. We have this command template application. I've actually used the command template in my first demo to do a pre-check for my firewall policy change. And what I can do here now is basically I can write a command. So for example, on this device, you should run this command, and then I can create certain rules for it. For example, I can say this should not contain this specific variable. And when I run this, I can actually, of course, substitute variables for this specific thing. So I could say, like, I don't know, it should not contain this interface type, ID, and port, for example, or it should not contain an interface that was deleted or is currently down, or stuff like that. All of these things I can do. I can see if those commands run successfully to make sure my device is in a good state for me to actually make a change. That's the whole idea around this command templates application. And I mean, you probably know that better than we do here, having done a lot of CLI management, a lot of CLI device configuration. There's a couple of things that can go wrong, or that would need to be addressed here. For example, some commands on some device types need elevated rights to be executed. Some have a different format on their response. If you happen to use NSO as your orchestrator, live action, their command system needs a couple of different prefixes to find the right operation, or the right action to execute. So there's a lot of things that can be configured there. And again, previously, this was just baked in to the code of this command template application. And to make this extensible device support possible, we've ripped that out of our code base and actually exposed that as what we call live status props in our integration here. And what we can do there on the adaptive properties, you could say, for example, if there's a command prefix like any on your command, this is where you need to go to execute it. Or if it's a show, this is where you need to execute it. You can even go as far as write shortcuts for specific commands that you use very often and route them to a specific action path to make sure you can go there even quicker, and you can absolutely create the right thing for you. And yeah, since there's, for JSON RPC, there's some fine things that you need to be aware of. And yeah, so for each device type, we have tons of those already set. So you always have examples of what our current system looks like. And there's I mean, 30, 40, 50 different device types that we already support just out of the box. But if you happen to have one that is not currently supported, you can literally just add those live status props here, for example, and say, oh, if I have this specific command, this is the action path that I need to call in my net, for example, and run that, and we'll respect that going forward without you having to create a ticket for us and us having to make a code change and you have to take a new version, stuff like that. You can play around with that and literally create new device support for command templates within our configuration section now. And the other part, the larger part of the extensible device support happens in the configuration management application. And you may have noticed, if you've used Configuration Manager before, in 21.1, we have this new section here called Configuration Parsers. And what configuration parsers do is exactly, it lets you now configure how we treat configuration from devices that come in. And the more configuration parsers you add, this is the list that's available for you to actually build golden configuration trees for those specific device types. So if, for example, previously you weren't able to create a golden configuration for your, I don't know, I think Ruckus device was something that we added a couple of days ago. If that previously wasn't in your list, what you can do in 21.1, you can go to configuration parsers, create a parser here for workers here, for example, and then it shows up in the list for golden configuration trees to be able to be created. So what does a configuration parser look like? I'm having here, and this is like a base template that I have here for Cisco ASA parser. And we're not talking about understanding the exact config that that happens on or that is put on the device. We're only talking about needing to understand everything to be able to do compliance and remediation reports. So what we need to understand, for example, is when does a line end? What is an actual word of the configuration? What are the parent-child relationships? So for example, understanding that there's no management-only line here, the parent is the interface management 00 here, right? These are the important things that we need to know about when we parse configuration. And so in this configuration parser menu, we have a couple of base like templated regexes already that we're looking for. On the right-hand side here, you can just load of any device that you have, you can load the current config, because the idea is you already have a device that you want to start managing in golden configurations. So you can just use that config to build your own parser on how to parse that config. And what that looks like is we're just going to click this execute button here. And now this configuration, this parser here has been run on this configuration. And this is the result. And we're actually seeing here by the color which rule was executed. So here we've understood a lot of words. We have understood a lot of parent-child relationships. But one thing we don't do well in this parser here yet is this these colon lines here. This is clearly not part of the configuration, but this is additional like operational data that come in, like the serial number or the hardware. If I were to just use this here in my golden configuration system, we would actually use those lines as well to check against golden configuration, which we absolutely don't want to do because it's not part of the configuration. And so what we can do here, for example, is we don't have any $sign characters in this configuration here. So what I could do here, for example, is I can just override this and say, the rule that I care for my ASA devices are, if there's a colon, we should treat that as a comment. So I'm going to refresh the execution and execute again. And what you see here now in this this orange rule actually has been executed against these lines that we found, the colon in the configuration. And this will now no longer be evaluated when we do golden configurations, because the comment section, of course, is not something that we do golden configuration against. The problem here, though, is we only have captured the colon itself and not the whole line after the colon. So again, like if you know regex, then that's good. If not, then you can use any kind of regex online tool to help you out there. But basically what we're looking at is, until the end of the line, any other character behind the colon should also be part of the comment. I'm just going to copy the regex for this in here. And what we see now is the whole line is now treated as a comment and is not used for any kind of golden configuration that we would do on this device. So we can now save our parser, say this is exactly what we wanted. And now we can go ahead in the golden configuration section and actually create a golden configuration tree. Maybe it's my like security compliance rules specifically for my ASA parser that I've custom built. I can go ahead and open that, and now I can provide my golden configuration here. I can add devices, ASA devices, and do the whole compliance reporting, zero-touch remediation. If you haven't seen those yet, there's tons of videos out there that showcase that. The last thing that I want to highlight, because I skipped over that earlier, is the whole notion of what happens when you have this sensitive data. So there's two more things that I can show about this actually in Automation Studio. So the first thing, if we just create a new workflow, and let's say push config. Create this workflow. So what I quickly wanted to show is this run config compliance task, because what that does, as I said earlier, it allows you, and I should have it here on my recently used task here, run config compliance, just that you see what that does. It basically kicks off one or more compliance checks for devices in a specific golden config tree. And what that means, or what it needs, is basically it needs a device name and the configuration that you want to push to that device. And I mean, any workflow, any end-to-end automation that you have, you already have the device name and the config that you want to push on that device. So there's no additional data needed for you to run this. You can just say, before you actually push this config, all you need to do is run this config compliance before. And the result of this run config compliance task is basically an array of compliance reports that you can check for. And if all of those are empty, then you know there is no compliance error introduced by pushing that config onto this device. So then you're on the safe side. And the last thing that I want to show, and I'm just going to use my same workflow here for time's sake. We talked about the sensitive data mode earlier, and that's a really good thing to show here in the workflow canvas as well. So I'm going to add a transition there. And let's actually use something that has sensitive data. Like let's, do we have something that does a password? Yeah, let's use this Ansible module, which basically changes the BTP password on an NXOS device. And what we see here in the variable section, it takes a password. And I mean, usually, of course, you would pass that in from a form that the user provided. But for now, I'm just going to say the new password is ABCD. Please, that's not backcrastic, so please don't ever do that. This is just for show purposes here to show you what we can do here. But basically, what I can do is I can run this automation now, which brings us to our job manager, in which we can manage the execution of our workflows. And what you see here in the job manager or in the task history, you see all incoming and outgoing data. And so among other things, you in clear text see the new password that I've set for my device, which of course is not desirable. And I also see the outgoing state, which might also contain sensitive information. So what I can do now in IAP 21.1 is I can actually go ahead and say the VTP password, I'm actually going to mask the data that comes in here. And if I provide that by a form or by another task or statically, it doesn't matter. I just want to make sure it's not visible in Job Manager. So I can mask this here. And I can also say, I actually want to mask the entire output as well, just to be sure that nothing can be seen there. And so if I run this information at this automation again, and I see it in Job Manager, what I see now, I've run the same workflow just with masked data. If I now look at the history and look at the incoming, I actually see that this data is now hidden for the average Job Manager user. So the VTP password cannot be seen anymore. And in the same way, the outgoing variable also can't be seen anymore. This is obfuscated on the UI. Of course, the API calls that actually make this change on the device, they still need that in clear text, and it's still available for all the modules and stuff that there are. But from IAP perspective, from like an operator using IAP to work tasks and to work jobs, this is now completely hidden. If you don't have a specific role in Job Manager that you should only assign to a very, very small amount of people, who are actually still able to show the masked fields that we have in Job Manager. With that, I'll go back to my slides. And I don't have a demo about it, but I do want to mention that on our IAG solution, which is a separate software product from the Itential Automation platform, we do now support native NETCONF and REST devices. So we have specific inventories on your IAG if you're using it to natively talk through NETCONF and through REST, make changes to devices, have our own inventory for them. So you're no longer required to use any helper modules or any helper code to basically build NetConf calls and to establish your connections there. All of that is now native to IAG, which in some cases significantly increases the performance. Of course, if you're talking through NetConf directly and not through any number of helper systems, you get a much better performance, and you can have an extended feature set because you can now natively make NetConf queries, which is very important if I want to have an encrypted configuration, for example. All of that stuff now possible in our Itential Automation Gateway. And with that, before we actually jump to the Q&A session, like the big announcement, so there's 2 or 3 big announcements of the day. So first of all, IAP 21.1 is now available on your Nexus repository. You can go to your Itential Nexus repo, and you'll see IAP 21.1 live there for you to download and for you to install. Please do put it in your labs. As always, feedback very welcome, and we'll have specific sessions about the specific features with all of you in the upcoming weeks. So that's available now. As I mentioned earlier, we now have training that is rolled out at the same day for our new IP version as the software itself. So if you look into your Itential Academy account, you'll see new training sessions with an IAP 21.1 overview, as well as specific training sections, for example, around creating your own configuration parser for extensible device support, or on how to use those JSTs on transitions. The other thing is that we're also launching free trials of our IAP Cloud version. So just go to itential.com/free trial and get your cloud instance, start playing around with it, and see how you can use IAP for your use cases. And with that, we'll open for Q&A. So I hope you've already typed in a couple of questions already, and I'll just go through as many as I can until the top of the hour. And I see there's already some coming in, which is awesome. So for the workflow groups, there's a question, can workflow groups be nested? We discussed that at length internally, and we've decided not to go with nesting because we want to keep use cases as they are on the highest level for those workflow groups. So while you can have a workflow in multiple groups, you're not able to have workflow groups within other workflow groups. Our best practice that we propose here is create the workflow group as the name of the use case on the highest level. And then you don't have to put everything in there. If you have a couple of shared instances, shared child flows, for example, you don't have to put all of them in that group, actually. Just use it as it's right for you, and use it in the way that you can improve the ordering of your workflows. Okay, next question here. Is there an easy way to move transformations that I currently use onto transitions? That's a very interesting question. So there is a way for you to do that. What you can do is you can basically copy the transformation that you previously had and reference it on a JST that you have put on a transition. So yes, that is possible, but there's no magic button that basically you can click on your workflow and then all JSTs would be on transitions instead of actual tasks, because oftentimes that might not be something that you actually want, because you might override different job variables in your JSTs. So we couldn't really guarantee that it would work the exact same way. So yeah, that's probably not something that you would want to do in a just change all kind of basis, but on a one-by-one basis, you can absolutely do that. What do we have here? How is access control handled for the new API gateway? Yeah, as I said earlier, so we do have those 3 new sections basically in Admin Essentials in the authorization page itself, where on users as well as on groups, you now have the option to specifically say, does that user have a certain role like admin, or only get calls, only post calls within a specific integration or within a specific adapter. That's definitely possible. And you can also create custom roles, and that's probably one of the cases where custom roles are really, really important, because what you can do here is you can create a custom role to only allow read access, for example, to an integration or to an adapter, and then one that actually has full access, admin access, or that's allowed to make changes to adapters. Those two should probably be separated in your environment, and that's probably how you should set it up. I mean, we have customers who even do it in a 3-way, in a 3 role system, where they basically create a custom role, one for read, one for like change things in terms of like update things, and then they create another, like, or they leave the admin role for specific things like higher level, like project types, as I showcased earlier with the Jira adapter. Maybe that's something that really only admins should be able to change, whereas a put or a post call to create a new ticket, that's probably an action that more people can execute. And then one more question that I'm receiving here is for the JST transitions again, for the live preview of it. So what that does is basically in JST Designer, what you can do going forward is you can just set the input. And actually, since we have 2 more minutes, I'm actually going to go to that real quick. So hang on for a second. Actually show that real quick. So if you just go to the JST Designer, and you can do that in the web service as well as in the version that is shipped within IAP 21.1. What you can do here, I'm just pulling up a map example. This is the live preview mode that I was talking about. And what you can do here is, once you have some input configuration, and in this one just creates, basically that creates an email address. So I'm just going to put in my name and company. Wow, that's hard to spell. Okay. And what this does is basically it, based on an example input, it gives me the current output. And so there's a lot of things I can do there. It's like, for example, if I were to remove this transition here, it would automatically update and say like, hey, currently the output is empty because nothing goes into. I'm drawing that transition. I actually get the output again. I can go into my function and say, for example, the company should actually be uppercase for some reason. Not sure that makes a lot of sense, but for demo purposes, that will work. So we're piping in the company in uppercase. And if we go back now, we see the result of our JST has the company in uppercase. So again, a super useful feature, specifically for people who are not as familiar with building those transformations yet, because they absolutely enable you to go about building your JST in a step-by-step manner, seeing what you're doing, seeing what kind of change different functions, different methods, different functions that you can put on the canvas, what they're actually doing. So yeah, a lot of good things for you available to just go and try those. You have, when you go to our JST Designer.Itential.io, you have a ton of pre-built examples that walk you through how you can solve different, very complex data manipulations with JSTs. That's all available to you. And thank you for that question. That was really good. Okay, with that, we are at the top of the hour. So yeah, thank you all for your time. We can spend thank you for the participation and the engagement. Hopefully you found this useful and valuable. Again, like I can only highlight enough. Go to the free trial. Go to our training section. Go to your Nexus repo and download the actual version that we've released. All of that's available to you. And yeah, I hope I see you soon, and I hope you have a great day.